You're tuning into the Journey to Your Best Self podcast, where we explore the past holistic well-being, personal growth, and living a fulfilling life. Each episode, we bring you insightful conversations, practical tools, and inspiring stories to help you integrate your mind, body, and spirit on your journey to becoming your best self. Let's dive in and embark on this journey together. Welcome back to the Journey to Your Best Self podcast. As always, I'm your host, Brian O'Neill, and I'm here with our resident expert and co-host, clinical hypnotherapist, certified life coach, yoga instructor, Tara O'Neill. My sister and I will explore transformative conversations in this transformative talk series on mental health, wellness, and personal growth. Today, we're extremely excited to introduce John Hall, a former Fortune 100 tech executive turned revolutionary performance coach. Over the past 30 years, John was on the inside and he realized that the true success goes beyond systems. It's about the people behind them. As the creator of the Breath Physiology Mindset method, John combines neuroscience with practical leadership strategies to help leaders unlock their full potential. He also champions heart-centered masculinity, building men to lead with both strength and compassion. Join us as we explore how John's methods can transform stress into peak performance, foster innovation, help you overcome imposter syndrome, all while maintaining a balanced, authentic approach to leadership and life. John, welcome aboard.
Hi, and Tara. So great to be here. So great to get to have this conversation today.
Yes, thank you. I think I'm going to learn a lot. Our audience is going to learn a lot, and let's get to it. Yay.
Yeah, absolutely. You want to start by giving us a little background. I had hinted at your journey a bit, being on the other side, as I said, but can you explain to those listening how your journey took you to this side, helping people in the corporate world rather than being, part of the machine, so to speak?
Yeah, absolutely. So I was a corporate tech exec for 30 years, right? 25 years with JP Morgan Chase. So I had a long career in this space and doing this, and did a variety of roles in technology. I mean, my background is technology. I think like I am a geek. I think like a geek. That's kind of how my mind works as an engineering mind. And so what I really did a lot of times in corporate was I was a fixer. I would parachute into troubled areas. I'd transform them, turn them around where they were having technology issues. But, of course, you find out technology doesn't really misbehave. It's the people in the process that generate these issues in the first place. So I got very adept at meeting with teams, working with individuals, and I wanted to understand what was going on at all levels, right? So I would get to know the people on the team very intimately and understand, what was going on, not just in their professional life, but their life overall, because all of this ties together, right? We like to kind of deceive ourselves and think we have separate lives. Like I have a home life and a family life and a personal life and a work. We don't, right? We're one person, one individual, and all these parts are us. So I had people coming up to me telling me, 10, 12 years later, this piece of advice you gave me changed my life, right? It didn't just change my career, it changed my life. And then I went through a series of life events, right? Where, sometimes life gives you these situations that seem like, oh my gosh, why am I going through this at the time? But it's really calling you into something so much more. And I went through a divorce, dug deep into what the heck happened. How do I make sure that never happens again? And begin exploring not just mindfulness, but understanding the physiology, the mind-body connection, which is such, we tend to think we're just mind. We get to focus on mind a lot. We miss the connection that our bodies have. And then bringing in breath. And that's what led to the BPM framework and led to me doing what I do today.
Excellent. What was the impetus for that? After decades being, with these Fortune 100 companies and, seemingly doing well for yourself, by traditional standards, was there an aha moment? Society become more accepting, or those financial industries and the like become more kind of accepting to this outside the box way of thinking, or did something happen personally to you where, you started to transform, so you wanted to help others find their way?
Well, I'd love to be able to say this was just, I had a great vision and everything opened up and I went off down this path. But C.S. Lewis has an expression. He says, pain is God's megaphone. And, sometimes I think things happen in our life that are there that feel incredibly painful at the time, but they're really meant to get us to wake up and acknowledge something and make a change. And so, as I mentioned, my divorce was part of it, and starting to go down the path of understanding and getting into personal development. And once you begin to see that you're more than just the collection of thoughts that you fill your head with every day, that you begin to see there's something more, right? Then it's really hard to go back, and you start to explore and go, wait a second, what is this really about, right? There's much more than I thought there was in this life. And then doors just opened up. I had been with Chase for 25 years, like I said, and they were doing some departmental changes, and they said, we're doing this and doing that, but really the opportunity came up to retire early was what they considered it, right? I'm not that old, I promise you, but it's like, here you go, you retire early, and it opened up the doors. I had gotten remarried. My wife and I, we kind of had a vision, like, what if we started taking all this stuff and sharing it with people? And so the doors just opened up on that one, and walked through it, and led me to where I am today.
Excellent.
There's a lot there, because similar story for me, archetypally, but a little bit different. And I always have compassion for people that do this work, because it means they went through a lot of suffering. And I know that's relative, but I appreciate you bringing all this to the world. And you so eloquently explain the awakening process, not that it can be necessarily defined, in a sentence, but do you find that people are able to connect with you because of that? And also, were there any influences from yoga or Buddhism or some of the Eastern philosophies? Was there a book? I usually ask that later on, but I'm just so intrigued with the whole story. So please, anything else you could share?
Yeah, no, absolutely. And it's such a great question. I love this because I think it's just a constant unfolding, right? I mean, it is definitely, I would definitely not claim I know it all. In fact, I think the gift of turning 50 was I realized how little I knew, and I was never going to know it all. And so I could just relax. And it was like, oh, this is great now. I'm not going to try to figure it all out,
Right.
And, in terms of influence, it's kind of a fascinating question because I'm Christian. That's my faith. That's just it's not just how I was raised, but it really came from a very personal revelation, a personal experience that I had to redefine that relationship with God as a result of it. And I also found myself going very open because, even meditation and yoga, I was raised, my dad was Baptist. My mom was Catholic. She converted to Baptist when they got married, and then raised Protestant after the divorce. So I joke sometimes I got a triple helping of guilt as a kid with terms of religion and what I got exposed to. And so, even I kid you not, like wearing shorts to church was a big deal to me because of how I'd been raised. And so, of course, meditation, yoga, a lot of these concepts were like, oh my gosh, I don't know about this. So this has been my own discovery of completely redefining, releasing religion and redefining relationship, right? And so some major books that have helped with that. I mean, obviously the Bible's been fantastic in looking at it in a completely different light of than how I was raised and how I was raised to understand it. There's a book by John Elridge, Wild at Heart, that I think is a fantastic book for men, along with King, Warrior, Magician, Lover. And also David Data's the Way of the Superior Man. But I think the biggest single book that really helped me was I was given a recommendation to listen to The Untethered Soul by Mickey Singer. And it just, every time I listen to that, and I keep getting called in life to listen to it again. And every time I listen to it, I'm like, this is completely something new. Yes. And I just love it so much.
Yes. Yeah. I can remember exactly where I was in my life when I read The Untethered Soul. And just it's so interesting because it wasn't even cognitively like being understood at the time. But you brought up a wonderful point. Sometimes these shifts in our lives can be a lot of fun because it's almost like you're learning things for the first time. And it's you can be childlike. You could see things
Yeah.
from a totally different way, and you could read the same book and it means something very different. And I know
It's
that's not a
so true.
question, but with the breath work, if we can go into that,
Yeah.
do you call it prana or chi? How do you explain the mechanism of? Do you utilize the science backing? Do you find people aren't really that concerned of how it works? Does emotion come up, or maybe even just share some of the techniques?
Yeah, absolutely. So there's so much in there to unpack, right? So I'll start with the spiritual side because we kind of were on this a little bit. And what's really neat is as I've done the research on it, because again, I'm coming at this from a faith standpoint of being a Christian. So I'm always like, okay, how does this tie in? And you hear through a lot of other, philosophies, oh, it's prana, it's chi, right? There's very specific terms that are given to breath and energy. Well, the fascinating thing is that this absolutely ties into both the Hebrew and Christian faith as well. So if you go back to actually the Hebrew and you look at Genesis and you go to Genesis and you look at the Hebrew, and I'm going to slaughter this word because I do not speak Hebrew and I cannot do the right through the back of the throat. But the word is literally ruach. And it says the ruach of God hovered over the water. And that is both breath and spirit. And it's literally defined, right? That word was what created the earth. The breath also created humanity. And the breath and spirit also created the Israelite nation by parting the Red Sea. So you can see where this ruach, this breath, has the same affinity and concept as prana, right? Which is, again, wind, spirit, energy. And that carries forward into the Greek. So pneuma is the word that's used for spirit and also breath. So where we get pneumatic, pneumonia, it's the same exact word. So across all of these, this concept is the same across, right? And that's what I love. I'm getting goosebumps. When you start getting into truth, right? You start getting into truth and it's like, oh, this is the same, whichever part I happen to be circled around the campfire, I'm seeing the same truth from every different vantage point from a slightly different angle, right? Slightly different thing.
Yeah, I love that so much. Thank you. There are so many similarities. I think we might be wired and conditioned to look at the separateness, but I always am looking for, well, if it's all similar across the board, they got to be onto something, or we got to be onto something, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And then on the second part you asked, so Joe Dispenza has a great point. He says, I hope I get it right. If you're familiar with Joe Dispenza, he has a quote along the lines of science is the new language of mysticism. Right. And so what's really cool is as you start getting into the science around breath work and you start to understand the impact it has, right? Especially in terms of triggering relaxation, calm meditation. A lot of people think meditation is, oh, I've just got to sit still and clear my mind. And it's probably clearing your mind is probably the hardest thing to do when
Yes.
you're starting to meditate, right? And so if you can, meditation is really just the focus. I'm focusing my mind on something and eventually I can focus my mind on it. And so breath I found is just such a powerful focal point. But then the science of it is really cool because what we're doing is the breathing, the way we do the breathing, especially a deep relaxing breath, is signaling to our vagus nerve, right, which is the wanderer through our body, going up to our brain, signaling that we're relaxing. And then we bring our physiology into it. And we're signaling again our mind to relax. And we start balancing out our autonomic nervous system. We start balancing out the sympathetic and the parasympathetic, the accelerator and the brake, right? We're balancing them both out. So we wind up in that state of like, oh my gosh, I'm relaxed and energized at the same time. This is amazing.
Yes, thank you so much. I'm gonna let my brother jump in because I'll ask another four-parter.
No, that's, a lot of the Tara definitely is vibing with a lot of that, because it's stuff that she definitely loves to impress upon our audience. And yeah, that's just amazing if you think about that state. I guess I'm going back to the transition and how you were able to go from that side to this side and help people out. I am curious about, some pushback or apprehension or hesitation that you might have got from traditional people in more of a left brain world that you are in, right? You're in the tech world, you're in finance, you're dealing with executives. It's about numbers. It's about being in the black. It's about getting things done quantitatively. How did you work around? I mean, did you face that initially, or are you still facing it now? How do you work around it with some people that are a little bit resistant to your methods?
No, it's a great question, Brian. Thank you for that. So, it's still facing it now to some degree, right? And so what happens is there's a couple of things. First off, I find out that I wind up attracting in a lot more people than me knocking on the doors and them opening up. The doors open in the right place when I need them to open, but a lot more people get attracted in and called in. Especially as I share information like this, they hear it, it resonates, and it's like, oh, I want to learn more about that. But a part of it is really learning to speak the language to people. So if I come into a business and I say, look, you're going to be more enlightened and you're going to be more awakened and you're going to see the truth of the reality of everything. Yeah, okay, great. Maybe I'll do this, but no thanks, right? But if I can come in and say, look, I can help your team be more innovative. I can help your team be more creative. I can help your team create 62 more minutes a week of productivity, right? Now, all of a sudden, it's like, well, wait a second. If I could have every employee on my team be an hour more productive, have less sick days, have less stress, actually learn how to take the stress that exists today and channel it to peak performance. So it becomes now, instead of stress being a burnout factor for my employees, stress becomes a way that we're going to beat everybody. We're going to be able to innovate and bring something out to the marketplace that's better than anything else that we've seen, right? When I can sit down with an executive and say, I'm going to help you handle your window of tolerance. I'm going to help you handle more chaos, more adversity, avoid decision fatigue. So you're able to make decisions more clearly and you're able to actually get into a chaotic situation and stay calm. Now, all of a sudden, we've taken the same concepts of breath work, of yoga, of mindfulness, of meditation, and we've translated them in a way that makes total sense to somebody who owns a business.
Amazing answer for sure. Because
We call
it's
it
counterintuitive, right? When you come in, they think, oh, we're adding something else to our plate. We don't already have the time to do the numbers we want or to get the things done that we want. But in fact, you are kind of you're fine tuning it and you're making them more efficient, right? Because of this new mindset and the breath work. So they actually will find, from what I'm hearing, that they have more time and they're more
That's right.
efficient and they utilize their time better, right? And they have the focus there and they have the stress, the lack of stress as well, because that gets you stuck. I'm sure that you notice just a team, right? Just a harmony, right? When you see that you have buy-in with a company
That's right.
and especially the leaders in the company, do you notice that when the leaders start to embrace your ideas and strategies that it's infectious and it spreads, to the rest of the people they work with?
Yeah, exactly. Because I mean, think about it. We spend, in the West, we spend the majority of our time if we're in a corporate environment in the West, we spend the majority of our time at work. That's the majority of our active day, right? Since the Industrial Revolution, we go into a factory or a workplace and we are there the majority of the time. And then we have commute times around it, right? It's very different than pre-industrial revolution with more of an agrarian society or what we know as entrepreneurship. But that's where a lot of people are. And so they get into this state of just almost like it's a zombie life. Like, I'm going into the office, I'm doing what needs to be done. And so when you bring in a way that makes it, wow, it's more fun, it's less stressful, it's more innovative, I'm being more productive, it feels better. Now all of a sudden it's like, well, I want some of that, right? That's infectious. That's absolutely infectious to be like, okay, what are you on? Because I want some of that because that looks great to me, right? So it does spread as we're able to do it. And the other thing is that, I mean, the science has shown this in business journals and research. People like to be part of a productive winning team. So when we're bringing a way that it's like, wow, it feels good to be productive. It feels good to be winning. It feels good to be supported, right? So now the stress feels innovative, right? It feels like it's motivating me to more when there's, and I say this, I'll just pause for a second. There's 3 different types of stress. There's new stress, which is like reading about something stressful about someone else. There's distress, which is the bad stress that causes all kinds of issues. And there's eustress, which is EU-stress, which is the good stress. That's the positive stuff. It's like the analogy I use is if you were a field goal kicker for a football team and you got called on for the Super Bowl to kick the winning field goal, it's stressful, but I've got support. I've got, the people on my team. I've got a coach, everything. I've been training for this. I've prepared for this. So everything's there to make that stress into me having the best chance to kick that field goal. It's actually motivating me to be that stressed. But now imagine you're in that same stadium, same field goal, same Super Bowl, same team on the line, and they go, Brian O'Neill, come on down front and center. You're going to kick this winning field goal. We're going to get some random people from the stands to be on your team. And by the way, we're putting your phone number out there and social media handles. So if you miss the kick, every fan knows exactly who to contact, right? Now we've created distress. We've created a situation that your stomach would be in knots, right? Unless you happen to be background as professional NFL football kickers, right?
Sadly,
no. So that's the difference. So when we start allowing, hey, here's how to transform stress into peak performance using BPM framework, people want in. People want more of this.
Awesome.
Amazing.
Tara, go ahead. You had something there.
Yes, I have a lot. I'm taking notes, so we might have to do a few more interviews in the future. But I loved when you said that they might gain 62 more minutes, because a lot of times people will say, well, I don't have time to work out. I don't have time to meditate. I don't have time to do this. And it's like, how do we get them to shift their mindset on that? I just say, try it for 30 days and see, right? You do an experiment, see how it goes. I'm curious if it's mandatory when you work. Do you ever have to work with somebody that's just not really involved or into it that much? They're just doing it because they're being told to?
There is that. There's a bit of hesitation. There's a bit of like, okay, I've been there, done there. I've done this before. It hasn't worked out. Right. All the stories that we get locked into.
Right. Yeah.
Right. So a lot of times the most practical thing is I use breathwork 3 different ways. I use breathwork tactically to regain control in a situation, to reset, to allow yourself, as Viktor Frankl says, that pause between stimulus and response, right? That's our freedom to choose is in that pause. So I work on, that tactically allows us to get into that pause space and not go to a trigger or an automatic response. I use breathwork strategically. So where we're building this, right, we're using on a regular basis to stretch our window of tolerance, to expand our nervous system to be able to handle more. And I also use it at what I call an operating system level, right? So I actually can get you through an extended breathwork session. I can get you into a more calm state, and we can start shifting limiting beliefs. So I'll give you an example of this, because this is exactly when I do this, all of a sudden they're like, oh, wow. If this happened in an hour, let me give it the 30 days. But let me share a story on this. So one of the entrepreneurs that I worked with, he had a business that was in the real estate business, and he was about to go live with it and go public. Sorry, he was live and he was going to go public when COVID hit. And it decimated his rental business. He was in survival mode, couldn't go public anymore, was reshifting everything, restructuring everything, and just trying to survive. And then he started rebuilding. He's rebuilt it back, but he was beating himself up with the story that he should have been much further along by now, right? I've spent way too much time on this. I should be much further along. So of course, when that limiting belief is in your mind, that you've got this self-judgment of I should be much further along, that's just running the show, right? That's stepping in so often and running the show. So we did a longer breathwork session right? Where I do more of a meditative breath work and get you down into that OS, and we start working with the OS. And he came out of it and he's like, oh my gosh, John, this is amazing. I had been beating myself up for so long. And now I can see I'm exactly where I need to be. And not only am I exactly where I need to be, I've got all these skills that I've honed to perfection over the last few years. And I'm just ready to take off. I'm ready to explode. I'm ready to go. So when that happens in 40 minutes, right? You give me 40 minutes and we're going to make some shifts. And all of a sudden it's like, well, you know what? Doing a few minutes of breath work every day for 30 days to see if this continues to expand in other areas of my life is not, it's not a sacrifice, right? This is an investment I'm willing to make.
Yeah. Is it similar to holotropic or holotropic breathing, or any of, like, Stan Groff is his name? The big guy back in the day, he kind of was a bit of a, what do you call, like, revolutionary in terms of having that really intense breath work where you're supposed to open your third eye and go to other dimensions, all of the stuff that's, a little out there, for lack of a better way to say. So is it the exhale, inhale, or are there different techniques? And I'm asking because personally, with my own breath work, I've always done better when I was with somebody else, because if I was by myself, I was like, yeah, that's enough. Ooh, I feel something uncomfortable. I'm good.
Yeah. No, it's great. I've done holotropic, I've done shamanic, I've done Wim Hof, I've done a number of different, box breathing, which is the one used by Navy SEALs. I've done a lot of different breathwork styles, but what I've really based my coaching on is a trauma-informed breathwork. It's more invitational. This is something designed by Sam Skelly with Pause Breathwork. Her and her team are amazing, just absolutely amazing. And they go into the science and the breath. And so when I do the breath work, it's more invitational. I work with a lot of people. Sometimes they get blown out by other breath styles. Like, it's almost too intense. And what happens is it's like you're chasing more the experience, but then you get I had one woman who was like, the last time I did breath work, I was blown out for like 2 weeks. I was just so sensitive to everything. It was almost overwhelming. And she was like, I loved the style that you brought because I came out of it feeling really good, because it's all invitational. I'm going to give you a breath and tell you and pace you, but it's your decision on whether to do this or not. I'm inviting you to breathe. I'm inviting you to release. I'm inviting you to move. So that approach, I feel like it works so much better. It's respectful of any trauma that we have. It's respectful of us having free will to participate in this. And it's also amazing how deep you can go, and then coming out of it not feeling like I've just been stretched out so far to an extreme that it's overwhelming.
Yeah, absolutely. And I would encourage people to definitely not, you obviously are trained, but if they do psychedelics and breath work, make sure they're doing their research, make sure that your body is able to handle that, because I have heard a lot of stories with premature kundalini energy and all sorts of emotional distress, that's what I was going to say earlier. We call it unicorn language, and you have this beautiful ability to leave out the unicorn language in a way that it can be trendy. I'm coming from Bali and Southern California, and it's like lingo. But thank you so much for articulating it for our audience, for me, and for those you serve.
Speaking the language, like you had said earlier, right? Depending on your setting, it helps to speak the language so you can better communicate. And it sounds like you're really doing a great job of tailoring, the invitational, as you labeled it. I'm thinking that it makes it easier to tailor and work with each person as an individual, depending on their level of experience, if you're introducing them or if they're looking for more. So you can really cater it to their needs, and it helps them be more comfortable, right?
Exactly. And I mean, we can go incredibly deep. I have one that I do on anger. which I only do with experienced breathers that I've worked with before, because it can, it's like you're dealing with a lot of energy with the anger, but it is so deep and so transformative at the end of this journey. It's such a beautiful experience. But, one of the things that I'll share, and when I first started getting into personal development, and I've also worked with masculine feminine dynamics, so a lot of times we get into personal development and it's this very niche style of masculinity, of like conquer it, push through it, overcome, break down, break through, right? That becomes the personal development, is let me just go force my way through this. And a lot of times we can get into, like you say, chasing experience. Like, oh, I need this experience in order to break through what's been limiting me. I need this experience to break through my trauma, right? I need my experience to break down this wall. And I love to look at it from a different perspective of masculinity, which is awareness. So if we think about the deepest form of masculinity, it's awareness. It's being present and aware of what's occurring. And I found that if we can bring that awareness to what's going on, we don't need to know the why something occurred. We don't need to know the root cause or what's going to come out of it. If we can just bring gentle, loving awareness to what's going on, and then all of a sudden the transformation starts to happen, right? We just see into that unconscious enough and bring awareness to it. And it's like it starts to unravel. So I have a different approach, and that's why this breathwork style matches up very well with that philosophy as well.
Amazing. Yeah, I didn't know you were going there with that answer, but loved it nonetheless. Can you speak a little bit to the difference when dealing with male versus female clients? Or you spoke a little bit about the traditional power through it. We have this idea of like just conquering, almost defeating, right? Dominating, right? Getting it out of the way approach to things. So what are the differences when you're working with the masculine versus the feminine? And that's a broad question, because within those categories, obviously there's differentiation there, but just in general, are there some commonalities?
Yeah, there's definitely commonalities. There's different differences. It's kind of fascinating because I'm having to think about it a bit, because it just kind of happens when I'm working with a different client that I adapt. I feel into that, and I adapt to the client. So I don't really have a mental framework around it. So you're making me pause a bit to go, how do I put this intuition into words? But there's a couple of things that do come out of it, right? I think number one, for every client, it's having a place of safety and trust, right? It's having someone that they feel safe with. They know they can trust. They know has got the container. So whether they're masculine, whether they're a man or a woman, or they're masculine or feminine, right? Primarily, they feel safe in the container, and they feel held in the container, and they know that they can open up in that space. There's something beautiful, I think, that men, a lot of times, see how to phrase this. It's easier for a man to open up to another man when they really trust that man. Because a lot of times when a man opens up to a woman, it can be destabilizing for a woman, especially if they're in an intimate relationship, for their man to show fear, vulnerability, right? Deep emotions. It can be unsettling. It can make them feel unsafe. Like, oh my gosh, well, if you're scared or you don't feel, you're anxious about something, then it starts to put me in a panic state. So a lot of times for a man, it's easier, like they can feel safer to open up those emotions and open up and be more vulnerable with a man, because there's no judgment there, right? And I'm not going to react and go into fear if you start opening up some deep fears or deep doubts that you've had to keep suppressed for a very long time. So that's a part of it, right? But I do know men, typically I can work more with challenge with a man. So not necessarily like, oh, you got to bust through and break down this, but I can give a bit more challenge. With women, it actually is a bit more of command. So, if they feel safe and they feel like they can move into a place of surrender, then I can balance that with a state of command and giving a bit more direct command. So there's a nuance between command and challenge, right? But that's something subtle, maybe, that I intuitively feel between the two.
Excellent. Do you notice before Tara? excuse me, please, on Journey to Your One Self, one of the things that we do notice is because of the degradation and even the loss in a lot of communities of institutions and fellowship and groups that in the past were there, whether it's a YMCA, a church group,
Yeah.
bowling
Yeah.
league, there's a lot less face time and a lot less support out there, that men are becoming a little bit more wayward and unable to find people that they may trust, that they can confide in. And now they're internalizing a lot of that. And maybe they have the internet as an outlet, but that's not really the same thing as face to face with other people. Are you
That's right.
seeing that a lot in a lot of clients and in the research and that you do?
You touched on something so deep for me. I'm like, okay, do we have another 4 hours to talk? Because this is something I love to talk about. I'll try to give you a touch on this because you're so spot on. You're so spot on. And I personally went through this. My parents got divorced when I was 12 or 13. And so I was a boy going into manhood at a stage without a father at home. And I was very fortunate, both mostly through Scouts. Boy Scouts was really where I had a number of role models, and then some great role models in church and in school. And I can tell you the names of them. I mean, Mr. Lane, Mr. Snipper, Mr. Wright, Mr. Graham. I can tell you these people. Mr. Robbins, I could go on. I don't want to miss anybody who's listening, but there's a lot there that I can go, wow, I have these powerful role models. But I want to pause for a moment because number one, the institutions are not there as much, right? They aren't. It's almost like we've gone through, I'm just starting to read The Second Mountain. And he talks about how we went through this shift of like having institutions in the 50s to like, no, individual freedom is absolutely the thing in the 60s. And so a lot of people are lost because it's like, well, that was great to reset the institutions because there were some things that needed to be torn down and addressed. But now it's like, but if we have no institutions, what creates the community? What creates the alignment? What creates the ability for me to feel like I have brotherhood or sisterhood or community? There's been a huge change in the way that we operate. If you think of it, pre-industrial revolution, especially for men, if a boy was growing up at the age of 8 or 9, he'd probably be an apprentice to somebody. So if they were wealthy, they'd have a private tutor. This boy would spend time with a man, right, being tutored and getting experience from another man. Or if they were, apprenticed, again, I'm a young boy spending all day with men, seeing how men interact, seeing how men work, seeing how men relate. Now, since the Industrial Revolution, we send boys to schools where, and I love the work that teachers do, but the reality is it's very rare to see men. I didn't have a male teacher before 5th grade. I had one. It wasn't until middle school that I got into seeing men as teachers. So you go to a school where you rarely get exposed to a lot of men in your early ages. Your own father, if your father's at home, you're seeing at the end of a workday. You aren't seeing him in his prime. You're seeing, oftentimes both parents at the end of the workday. You aren't seeing how they go through the workday. You're seeing them at the end of the workday.
That's a great point.
It's such a different experience. And then you bring social media into it, and there's this imagery of who you're supposed to be. And it's a huge challenge for not just, look at the struggles we have as grown adults by comparing ourselves to other people. And now imagine being 12 or 13 trying to figure things out. And this is what we're exposed to.
All right. Well, there's a lot of work to be done, but hopefully we can get there, spreading this message and the things that you, I hope to accomplish. Tara, go ahead.
Yeah. So what I was going to ask, but then of course I'll have 2 or 3 more to add on to, is that you mentioned the masculine being present, and there is a common complaint from women that sometimes their male partner, or the masculine partner is there physically, but not there mentally, or present, right? Or the age old, like, what are you thinking about? Nothing. Like, I know that could be true sometimes, but really, we crave that. Does the breath work help both parties be more present and or fluid?
100%. I love this question so much. 100%. So so many things I'd love to share. I'm going to keep it keep it down. Um, so I'll share this story quickly. So when I was a few years ago, I was out with my 10-year-old nephew and my brother. We were walking through the woods at night and in the neighborhood, and we had been told that there was a rabid fox somewhere in the neighborhood. And we had given our nephew the flashlight so that we could walk. But of course, he's thinking about the rabid fox all the time. So that flashlight is just, it's dark. We're trying to walk on the streets, and that flashlight is all over the place. Every sound, it's in the woods, it's up in the trees, it's behind us, right? It made it very hard to walk because we're in the dark. We need the flashlight on the road, but that flashlight is all over the place, right? It's shining everywhere because he's thinking rabid fox and where's this thing going to come attack? And we finally had to take the flashlight so we could point it at the road and we could figure out how to walk and how to move forward. And the reason I share that is because our minds are, right, we give the flashlight and the focus of our minds to that 10-year-old nephew every day. You think about where our minds, if our minds are not trained, they are all over the place. We're thinking about what happened this morning. We're thinking about what might happen next. We're totally caught up in what to say next, or what's the best question now, or what's for dinner, or caught up in the emotions that we have, and we're anywhere but here. And so that's literally, this is why I created the BPM framework, because breath is one of the first, simplest, easiest, very practical methods that allow us to regain our focus, right? When we take a deep breath, and especially the way that I do it, just a deep breath in through the nose to the belly, exhaling through the mouth, is such a calming breath. And it's doubling down because it's bringing all of our attention on the mind to the breath, but it's also signaling, the breath is telling the body to signal the mind to calm. And then we integrate the physiology, and that now you'll feel it. A woman will feel her man drop in a heartbeat, right? Going breath, physiology, and then mindset. She will feel his presence come in, and his mind will learn to be more focused. And likewise for her, she'll start to feel more embodied, right? Getting out of her mind and into her body. And she'll be again to feel calm, which will allow her to feel safe and relax and be able to feel his presence as well. So it's a beautiful way for both parties to do that.
Yeah, absolutely. You touched on a really important point that a lot of the time our partners or families don't get the best of us. So even if you're like, oh, no, I'm fine, we energetically can feel that. So we definitely I would love to tell people that, right? It's not about fighting over the laundry or not cleaning up after dinner. It's really the state of our system. And we really need to learn how it works. And then we can learn how our partners works. And I love how you said that the female can feel that, because absolutely when they downshift into that nervous system, rest and digest, then the woman can open her heart even more. So you have, two biggest nerve balances, so to speak.
Exactly. And one of the things I loved, you talked about rest and digest, right? And it's also that parasympathetic is also your create and procreate. One of the kind of the I do a little pre-flight before my breath work, and I explain to people what may happen as they go down this. And one of the things from doing an autonomic nervous system reset is that you can have different arousals. You can have a physical arousal, like I need to move, stretch, hit my fist on the carpet. I can have an emotional arousal where different emotions come out. But I can also have a sexual arousal, because that is all controlled by this autonomic nervous system. And a lot of sexual dysfunction is related to just we're so jacked up in the parasympathetic that this other part of it can't even function, right? I mean, how much medicine and pharmaceuticals do we need to try to balance this stuff out when we've got the ability to do it right here in our bodies through breath and physiology?
Yes, definitely. So people make more love and we'll get more regulated and put the devices down.
Yeah.
Heart-centered masculinity coaching. Can you speak a little bit to how, that your approach differs from others out there? There's a decent amount of people that are trying to do good work or are just trying to do work. How does, heart-centered masculinity from John Hall distinguish itself?
Yeah, it's wow. And this is something, I feel like I'm standing on the shoulders of giants as I've learned everything, because there's so many amazing teachers that I've built and incorporated and done this on. And I'm by no means claiming it's the best way. I'm just claiming it's a different way. But really, I believe that there's, and I'll come in from a business standpoint on this, so I'll kind of speak the language of business for people to understand. But a lot of times, especially in the corporate world, or what we've been trained to do through education, is we operate almost entirely in the mind. And in fact, it impacts our creativity, because there was research done where you could give a paperclip to a kindergartner. They can come up with 100 different uses for that paperclip, right? By the time you're in, and it decreases to like 40 in middle school, and by high school, you're down to 8. If you can get 8 uses for a paperclip, you're doing outstanding, right? And then you get out. We get a little better as we get older, but the reason is that we're taught to be in our mind, and we're taught to use the logic part of our mind. So we immediately put the brakes onto anything. We come up with a creative idea, like a kindergartner go, well, what if the paperclip was made of cheese? What if it's 100 feet tall? What if it reached from here to the moon, right? They're thinking creatively and letting all this out, and we're hammering the brakes down with our mind. So the reason that I teach, both mind, heart, and core is because I think it's a matter of recognizing our mind, but not being enslaved by the mind, not being trapped in thinking that this little 10% of the iceberg that's above the water is all that it is, right? And then understanding our emotions, understanding our subconscious, understanding our body, and understanding the impact, not where we get totally caught up in our emotions, but not that we ignore them either. And then we get swept away by them because we don't see them and understand them. And for men especially, this is a big deal. We're taught not to connect with our emotions, and we aren't necessarily taught to connect with our bodies either. So we miss a lot of what's there. And then really bring that all together into the heart. Being able to bring together into our heart, which is where, when we're in that place of quiet, and I have a whole explanation where I compare it to the eye of the hurricane, which I went through as a kid, actual eye of a hurricane. And it's just an unbelievable thing. But being able to bring it all into our heart space. What's really fascinating, we were talking about, I talked about the Hebrew and how this ties back. Hebrews did not have a concept of mind. This is a Greek concept of mind. To the Hebrews, the Hebrew language, it was heart. Your who you were was in your heart. You were not your mind, you were your heart. They knew there was something up here, but they talked about the heart space, right? Test my heart. Know my heart is pure. And so really it's activating back into that heart space, where I think is where the connection comes out. I've also done, this is where King, Warrior, Magician, Lover comes in, because this also correlates to those different masculine archetypes and how it maps out this way in our body as well.
Terrific. So in sync with mind, body, and spirit, the foundational stuff that we always try to promote at Your One Self. Before we leave, I did want to talk about one of your expertise or areas that you'd like to focus on is helping others overcome imposter syndrome. And for the uninitiated, can you give a little explanation of what that is? And how to overcome it? I mean, how you work to overcome it? Maybe a little bit sneak peek behind the scenes. Is it about just developing a confidence? I'm assuming based on our conversation, it's not about the traditional approaches, maybe of just powering through and being an alpha and just dominating whoever's around you. And then I'm no longer encumbered by imposter syndrome. But can you define it a little bit and speak to how you work with people trying to overcome it?
Absolutely. Absolutely. So, and it's very personal for me, right? Because, 10 years ago, I didn't feel comfortable with other men. I felt like I didn't belong. I felt like an imposter. I felt like I was going to be found out, right? I didn't feel comfortable being with other men because of everything that I had been through and my own backstory and what had happened from childhood on. And then in business, of course, you step into a new role in business and you feel like I've taken on too much. I've bit off more than I can chew. I don't really belong here. I'm going to, like, one of the biggest things I found in imposter syndrome is I'm going to be found out, right? That's probably one of the most common voices is like, I got into something, but if people really knew the truth, right? If people really knew the truth. And that's where I think that imposter syndrome comes in. What's good is if you've ever felt like a fraud, you've ever felt like you don't belong, you've ever felt like no one really wants to hear my story or I will be found out, the wonderful thing is that means that you're growing, because imposter syndrome is a natural part of growth, right? We feel like, hey, I don't belong in this space anymore. I'm being called to more. Or I've stepped up and I've been called to more and I've taken that step, but now I feel like I'm going to be found out because I don't really belong, right? But the beautiful thing is that it's growth, it's change that's called us into and created this dynamic. And Brian, you queued this up so perfectly for me, because it is not about powering through. The science behind it shows that if we use self-control, it burns out. There's a limited reserve of self-control. Okay. They did a study and they found like the difference between if you've ever started, to like, I'm going to focus on my health. And someone comes up and says, hey, I've got some chocolate cake. You want some? And I go, oh no, I can't eat it. Right. That's a self-control. I can't eat it. Right. I can't eat chocolate cake. I'm going to use my self-control. I'm not going to eat that. But then the other way is our identity. We identify as a healthy person. So someone comes up and they say, hey, you want some chocolate cake? And we say, no, I don't really eat chocolate. Right. And the identity, using your identity versus self-control, not only does identity not get depleted, but identity-based statements were 50% more likely to achieve our goals when working with our identity-based statements than self-control. And they've done studies like with judges, the rate of parole decreases right before lunch when judges were hungry. There's literally a correlation to the glucose level in our brain and our ability to self-control. It's why if you've ever been in a difficult family dynamic, you'll make poor choices afterwards, because it depletes our reserves to do self-control. So what I do is I don't work with, hey, go power through it, just believe it, just go do it. There's a rationale for just doing it. But this is really around, let's get down to that operating system level. Let's get down into redefining who you are, shifting your identity, right? That's where I use breathwork at the OS level to make those deep shifts and shift your identity so you can feel it, you can see it, you believe it. And now you're going out there knowing who you are. I'm not saying you're going to never feel like an imposter, but what we've done is using neuroplasticity. We've stomped down a new path through the grass. And now when you wake up in the morning, you can choose that new path. Right now, you go, oh, I'm halfway down the old path. Let me go back and choose the new path. Right. So we create that new pathway, and then eventually that becomes the well-worn path. And the other one fills in with grass, and it looks beautiful, and we don't even have to go there.
Yeah, excellent. And just to really embolden, kind of put an exclamation point on a point you made before I hand it off to Tara, the self-identity and the strengthening your identity is going to make it more of a longer lasting change, right? So if you use the self-control, as you put it, some might say willpower, it's possible you might say no to that chocolate cake, once, twice, even 3 times. But if you change your self-identity and now you are a healthy person, and like you said, within, and you have developed those neural pathways, I mean, that's just going to be so much more of a longer lasting change. So really,
Exactly.
really, really good stuff there. Tara?
Exactly.
It really goes to show the power of the mind and the conditioning, and that could be a piece of broccoli and people go, oh, I can't eat that. So you really you can. I'm being a little flip because I want people to understand that they do have a choice. A lot of times they'll say, well, I can't eat that, and it's like, well, why not? Well, I don't know, I never tried it, or like I don't like that because my father didn't like it and now I don't like it. So many things. A lot of this is self-awareness, correct? And also, do people have a trauma stored in their physical body, or is it more the electromagnetic field around us, or both? And so I guess what I'm getting at is, can they cleanse some of these old beliefs and emotions that were never theirs to begin with?
It's so unfair because it's such a beautiful question. I'm like, do we have another hour? Because you touched on something so deep. So yeah, this is absolutely, there's absolutely, try to think how to cue this up. So you're familiar with like sanskara, right? The concept of sanskara from Hindu,
Yes.
right? Where almost there's the analogy I use for people who might not be familiar is like, let's say that a young girl, her parents divorce, and her dad takes her out to a little those soft serve ice cream by the side of the road, twisty treat, and sits her down and says, your mom and I are divorcing, and that's the last she ever sees of her father. Right? And then fast forward 20 years, she's with her fiance, a man she loves deeply, and he goes, hey, there's a twisty treat on the side of the road. They're on a road trip. It's beautiful. And they pull over, and right, she gets the twisty treat. And all of a sudden this resonates all the way back to this deep trauma, this deep moment of what happened with her father. And without even knowing it, right, all of a sudden it releases emotions or fights or arguments or distance or all sorts of things, because that memory was stored in our body and it never got processed. So this is absolutely where the breath work allows us to get into this space, because what happens is we unwind these from gentle awareness, right? We don't unwind that by powering through it. We don't unwind it by just, I'm just going to go through and break down this trauma, right? We unwind it through gentle, loving awareness. So what happens, and I found that actually on the longer breathwork sessions, it almost mirrors a psychedelic, like a plant journey experience, because there is literally an opening, and then you're in this deep state that you're able to kind of get down into the neural network, the default node network, and start changing some things. And then you're out of it, right? And then you're out of it, and you don't have to fast for a full day. Now, I'm just saying, this is one thing. It's
Right.
not, they're different.
The Amazon,
and they're all
not
beautiful
needed.
in their own way. But this is an hour that can be done in the middle of your day, right? That you can do and get into that level. So yeah, it absolutely can work and unwind some of these things as well.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for that. Yeah, I have obviously an affinity for the subconscious mind. And, I like to say the phrase often used, everything is learned and anything learned can be unlearned. And that's so empowering.
Yeah.
So.
When you get into, and I've had a couple situations where literally I can see like it's this one thought that's causing my suffering. If I change this one thought, all of a sudden I'm not suffering anymore, right? It is. And, you start getting down to that level of like, oh my gosh, here's the thing that is causing my suffering in this moment. It's not this situation. It's this thought that's doing it.
Yes. Wonderful. And before we wind down, I was going to say, with the Untethered Soul, Michael Singer has a podcast for anyone that is interested in that book or might read it or want to check out the podcast. That was a really, really good one. I think he's still doing it, but anything on Sounds True, I'm a fan of. If you're starting to dabble into these awakening type exploration, identity questioning. But thank you, John. You taught us that it doesn't have to always be the, move to Bali and, do yoga full time and meditate every day. I mean, I'm maybe making fun of myself a little bit, but that everyone has, their own way of doing it. And just because you're working in a 9-to-5 in corporate America, it doesn't mean that you are not self-actualized or you're not growing or evolving. It's all, how you show up and how you're present, in my opinion. So that's the takeaway that I got. And it was so beautiful and valuable. I hope we have you back.
Absolutely. I've enjoyed this so much. This has been fantastic. I could just chat all day.
Absolutely. You gave us so many, you preemptively gave us so many book recommendations. So I wanted to go in a different direction as we kind of wrap. We do like to give our followers and listeners at Year One Self and to Journey to Your Best Self some practical tips or guidance or strategy every episode. So could you maybe give us a little behind the scenes of BPM, maybe something tactical that that people could do if they find themselves in a situation, stressful, anxious situation where they are maybe sensing that they might, s- shut down or, really get to a point where they're not being productive or they're not able to continue, what they were currently doing.
Yeah, absolutely. In fact, I have a course called Breathe Easier that goes into this, but I'm going to give you the high level summary and very practical for people who do it right now.
Awesome.
So, the probably the key point, see how to summarize this. Okay. Probably the key point to think about is when we get stressed, we get anxious, we tend to we feel it in our mind, and we tend to try to use our mind to overcome it, right? How many times have we been yelling at ourselves in our mind with our own little voice going, calm down, get it together, right? Sort it out, right? Pick it up, right? It's our mind. So we're trying to use our mind to overcome stress. But what's going on is it's really a full body response. Our body is feeling unsafe in a moment of stress and anxiety. And so what we're doing is we're basically having a 6-year-old girl in a kitchen screaming at an 800-pound gorilla to calm down, right? That's literally what we're doing by using our mind to try to overcome our body's somatic response. And the science behind it is very, very clear, right? So what happens is this front part of our brain is the prefrontal cortex. It is our wisdom, our logic, our executive CEO. And it was actually researched by relational expert John Gottman. He proved with an MRI that when our heart rate goes over 100 beats per minute, the blood flow to this logical center of our brain goes offline. So now in a moment of crisis, when we most need it, right, that high level functioning of our brain just went offline because of stress and anxiety. And our amygdala, which is back here, which is the more primitive reptilian part of our brain, has hijacked our brain for a matter of safety. And this made perfect sense thousands of years ago when we were in the wilderness and a pack of wolves came up to us. It does not make great sense when our partner's telling us that our in-laws moving in for 6 months and we're going to have that, right? That's going to happen, right? So that's not a good time. Or someone tells us the report is late, or someone tells us the system went down. We don't need the same response of like, I'm about to fight off a pack of wolves, right? Different situations. So the first step that we want to do is we want to recognize it's a somatic response, and we want to there's a very specific breath, and I'll walk you through this. So if you're listening and you put a hand on your belly and you put a hand on your chest, right? And you just take a deep breath in and see which hand moves more naturally. And if your belly hand moved more than your chest hand, that's great. But if your chest hand moved more than your belly hand, we're going to do it again, and we're going to focus on moving that belly hand. Okay. So breathing in through the nose and just bring all the breath to the belly hand to make that move. Nice deep breath in, and then exhale through the mouth. And when you do the belly breath, and we were born belly breathing, but we were taught to chest breathe over time. When we do the belly breath, what we're doing is that deep breath in with a longer exhale than an inhale signals our vagus nerve that we're safe. That is a way our mind can't tell our body to calm down, but our mind can tell our body to breathe. And when we breathe, our breath tells our body to calm down. So now what happens is we've sent that signal because of the breath. This is the first part of BPM in this example. We've sent the signal with our breath to our amygdala that we're safe. We've just sent the first signal of safety. Now, in a stressful situation, what we're going to do is we're going to bring our shoulders, we're going to open our chest up and drop our shoulders back. And we're going to open up the chest because that, again, is signaling safety. What do I do when I'm in danger? I'm closing my chest. I'm protecting my heart. I'm tensing inwards, right? So now I'm going to drop my shoulders back, open my chest, drop my hands in my lap, repeat the breath, right? So Now we're going to do another deep breath in through the nose to the belly. And exhale through the mouth. And now I've doubled on that signal from the body to the brain to relax. So by this point, the amygdala should start releasing the hijack, letting blood come back to the prefrontal cortex. Now I can start training my mind on what to focus on, training my mind on positivity, training my mind on either gratitude or just being present or repeating it could even say, I'm safe. My mindset is simply, I'm safe. I'm safe, right? And now we've allowed our mind function to come back online, that the messages we start putting in our mind can tell us we're safe or tell us and look at opportunity. And it's amazing. It's very simple, straightforward, but it is amazing how effective this is. And this is the core part of the framework, right? So this is expanded out in multiple different ways, but it all uses this BPM framework it is all backed by science. I can go into the science for days of why this all fits together, what's going on in your body, in your mind. But this is a very practical way. I explain it a lot more in the course online, but a very practical way to just release a hijack, overcome a trigger, get back to a state of expanding that space between stimulus and response.
I feel relaxed. And it really can be that simple in terms of, it doesn't have to be a 45-minute session every day, right?
Yeah,
Well, thank you
absolutely
so
incredible.
much.
Very, very useful. I believe very practical. I thought I got some gratitude in there as you mentioned it right after the second breath exercise. I'm thinking about the people that support us, listeners, followers. Always want to thank them. One of the ways that we do give thanks is try to get these really impressive guests. And Mr. Hall, John Hall coaching has really hit that mark. And I think you've given so many insightful ideas. This technique that anyone can use. You don't need training. You don't need to go somewhere. You don't need any equipment. We have the coaching piece that we're going to talk about. But that was just so helpful. I love the idea that somebody can just listen to that. And you said, join in with what you were working on, or now an hour later or tomorrow when they get back from their 3-day weekend, something happens at the office, they can apply that right then and there. Just go to a quiet space or separate yourself, even if you had to step into the hall, bathroom, close the door somewhere, find a conference room, and that can really help get you through the day, and they really appreciate it. So thank you very much, John. Where can people find more about you? You've given them a little sneak preview, a trailer. Where can they connect with you, learn more about you, and let us know? We'll keep everything in the show notes, but where online they can reach you.
Yeah, absolutely. My site is johnhallcoaching.com, or you can just Google John Hall Breathwork. I'm going to pop up there. And so johnhallcoaching.com, and you'll see there's a little banner at the top for overcoming imposter syndrome. That's my gift to everyone. You can click on that, get free access, and you'll see all the different opportunities to work with me on that as well.
Wonderful. You've been an inspiration to us and to probably everyone listening. So I hope they go to your website, and I look forward to connecting again soon.
Same. Thank you guys so much. I've so truly enjoyed this.
Thanks, John.